recording. Yep.
Right. And I, I'll clean up the beginning, but it just dawned on me, I hope I have enough room on my computer for this file where I'm saving it to. Because when you do audio, you do, audiobooks and things like that. It's like it takes
Yeah.
up space fast. So,
Oh yeah,
well,
it does.
well, how you doing, Kris Bennett?
I'm good, man. I'm doing
Thanks
good,
for,
Steve. It's kind of funny. I haven't seen you in a while, and you see each other on Zoom. It's kind of crazy technology,
yeah.
right? You can like see people from thousands of miles away in an instant. So yeah, good to see you, man. Appreciate you having me
Yeah.
on.
And I see you're joining the Bits of Gray in your hair club,
Yeah,
as am
I
I.
sure am. I have been for a little
Yeah.
while, actually.
Well, I'm not even
Started
going
happening
gray.
like,
I'm going white.
yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely, man. So it's thinning and graying out, and we're all getting old. So
Right.
yeah.
Just for I'll cut this out, but I've noticed the overlap, or like the lag. So forgive me if I sound like I'm trying to overpower you. It's probably just because there's 2 or 3 seconds.
Oh, that's no problem. Yeah.
But you get it. You've done a podcast.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Um, so yeah, Kris, you just mentioned, we haven't seen each other in person or anything in a super long time. So even without Skype, I would imagine maybe one of the last times I was in Charlotte at a missions conference or something, I might have seen you, or we might have been in the same
Yeah.
building. Uh,
Yeah. It would probably over 10 years ago is my guess.
right,
It's 2022 now. So yeah, it's definitely been at least 10 years or more. So a
right.
long time. I do remember you walking around the halls, man, in fire in Pensacola and all of that,
Well,
all those memories. It's
well,
funny.
what's funny is I vaguely remember that you used to work on staff, right? And
Yeah.
when I
Yeah. Back in the day.
applied, when I applied to go to fire, it was right after there was a split between fire and Brownsville
Yeah.
or BRSM, and I didn't know what to do, and I applied to both schools, and
Yeah.
BRSM were like
That's
on
funny.
top of their
Yeah.
game, right? They were calling me. They were said that I got accepted. They were sending me stuff, but then at fire it was like, does it exist? Like, are there people? Like, there's a website. There's nobody getting in touch with me. But that's where I wanted to go. That's where the teachers I'd watched videos by, and you were the person who um, answered the phone when I called looking for Keith Collins, I think it was.
Oh my
And
gosh. Really?
I
That's
vaguely
funny.
remember that, yeah, because of
Wow.
your distinct voice. And then when I
Wow.
got there, and you see who's on staff or whatever. So
Yeah. Yeah.
you were like in the office, or I don't know.
Yeah.
And then we went to Charlotte, or no, the after 9/11, the that prayer event, and you were
Yeah.
like our leader on the bus or whatever,
On the bus. We were going
from
to the Call
Pensacola to,
DC or something
yeah.
like that. It
No,
was
no,
the
no,
Call
the other
DC, the
one,
Call
the,
New England. New
yeah.
England.
So
Yes.
I knew you a bit from a distance. I don't remember knowing you at school
Man,
or
that's funny.
anything, but in
I
the years
forgot about
after.
that.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
easy
That's
to
so
forget.
funny.
So
Yeah. And
yeah.
I assume we were talking earlier on. I assume like there's some folks from Fire. Like if people don't know, it's Fire School of Ministry that we're talking Bible school and all that back in the day. And it was in Pensacola, Florida.
Yeah.
Broke off, I guess, split off from Brownsville. If people know that, like if you don't know that, what, no big deal. But yeah, so
Yeah.
that's what happened. It was like that was 2001, 2000, yeah, 2001.
Right.
Right about the beginning of that year is when that happened.
Yeah. Regular listeners of mine know what
Yeah,
fire, they should know what
yeah,
fire is if they've listened to me a while. But
yeah,
that's a good
yeah,
point for clarifying some details. And
yeah, yeah.
uh and then eventually they moved that school to Charlotte.
That's
And
so funny. Yeah.
so some people know about fire. They know who Dr. Michael Brown is. I was talking to a guy yesterday about being on his podcast, and I said
Mhm.
something, and he goes, "You're talking about Fire School of Ministry, right?" It's like, "Yep, sorry, forgot to mention. Yeah, I lived in Charlotte 10 years. I know, Lowe's Motor
Yeah,
Speedway and that church stuff." I
yeah.
was like, "Okay, yeah." Um, so yeah, we both come out of that, and
Hmm.
you're still in Charlotte. You have, you're doing
Yeah.
other things, right?
Yes.
But
Yeah,
you're still
absolutely.
living there.
Yeah, still living here in Charlotte. I guess kind of give a background real quick.
Do it.
Yeah, so we moved here, the school and the church and all that relocated to Charlotte in 2003. I think it was roughly around that time when I was working on staff. I left to go do real estate around 2007. So I went and did residential real estate. And if everybody remembers in that time or whatever, it was like the recessions, Great Recession. So it was a really bad time to be. It was like the worst time in the last 30 years to be in real estate, was around that time. So kind of slugged it out and realized that I didn't like what I was doing at all. I didn't like residential real estate. So I want to go do something else. And I decided to go to school because I was trying to figure out what that looked like. And I figured that would be the opportunity in the way. Like I wanted to go do something like super nerdy, like math, Asian stuff. And I'm half Korean. If anybody listening, I'm half Korean. So
right.
Anyway, so I want to go do something.
I've told you this is going to be audio only. So people can't see
great. Okay.
that there might be a mix.
So that's
important.
Whatever. Yeah. So I'm half Asian. So I always joke about that stuff. But I want to go to school and find a job somewhere and just have some stability in my life and so on and so forth. So ended up going to community college here in Concord, Rowan Cabarrus Community College, and then transferred to UNC Chapel Hill. And my plan was either to go there, like kind of like you applied, Steve, to like the RSM or fire, or literally go to fire, but I'll apply to both and just kind of see what happens. That's what I did. I applied to UNC Charlotte and UNC Chapel Hill and got into UNC Chapel Hill. So was excited about that. If people don't know, like education wise, background wise, which a lot of our friends may not, like, hey, and that's okay. UNC Chapel Hill is very different. It's public Ivy is what they call it. So it's a very difficult school to get into, and it's very difficult academically once you're there. So I got straight A's pretty much all the way through community college and took through Calculus 3 and got an A in that as well. Got to UNC Chapel Hill and took the next level of math, kind of like Calc 4, but not really. And I got a 30% on the first exam, and the class average was a 40. So essentially I got a D still compared to everybody else. Yeah. So that's the way it works. And if you take biology, a lot of people want to go like the medical field or whatever. At least when I was there, when you take biology courses, that's like the stepping stone. They call it a weed out class. And so if the grades are too high on average in the class, they actually round it down so that people will not pass the class. And so only those who are very smart or very driven or whatever can move on to take bio 2 and chemistry and all that kind of stuff and go on and become medical professionals. So that is the difference between a regular college and like a Harvard or whatever. Like that's how it works. So it's pretty difficult. So anyway, I went there, changed my major, focused on economics. I realized that super nerdy Asian math stuff wasn't my thing. And I liked economics and business. And so I did that. I applied to the business school, got in. They have a real estate program there. The only job I could find the first summer that I was there was working for a real estate company. It was just kind of ironic. Maybe it was the Lord, you never know. But the guy I was working for, he was actually buying apartment complexes. Up until that point, I only known people who had bought single family homes and would rent them out. It's like some people might remember the fire days where there was like students living like 3 or 4 or 5 people in a house, and the house was owned by whomever, right, who went to fire, and they rented from that person. So that's all I really knew about like rental properties. This guy was buying like 160 units at one time, like an apartment complex, and paying like, I don't know, $10-16 million for that stuff. So I'd never seen that many. My eyes were bugging out, like the number of zeros I'd seen I was using like a spreadsheet, Excel spreadsheets to like look at this stuff. And I couldn't believe like the amount of money he was paying, and then how much money it made, and how much he was paying per unit. And he was paying like, let's call it 160,000 a unit, 150,000 a unit. It's meaning that 2-bedroom apartment was costing him about $160,000. Well, if you look at a single family home, you might buy one for 160. So he was essentially buying like 150 single family homes at one time. And that to me made so much more sense than going out and doing it. It would take a lifetime to buy 160 single family homes. It would take a long time to do that. So anyway, I discovered commercial real estate. I graduated, worked for a commercial real estate firm in Raleigh. We moved back here. My wife and I moved back here in 2018, and have been doing that type of stuff ever since. So we can talk about that more if you want, but
I wrote down a couple little notes. I wrote down a couple of things to like, not interrupt you, but come back to if the conversation goes that way. And so, so how far away is Raleigh from Charlotte?
About two hours. About
okay,
2 hours.
See, when you're like me and you've not been to Charlotte for like 10 years or 12 years or whatever, it's easy to not realize like some people are not there anymore. Or I had a roommate that I lived with in Concord outside of Charlotte who, he got into it, a profession. And I think what he's doing now is different than what he left fire to go do. And
Yeah.
anyway, so so his wife Leslie, this guy's name is Chad Bryan. You probably know
Hmm.
him, and his wife
Yeah, I know
Leslie.
Chad. I remember Chad. Yeah.
Right. So, but I remember not knowing that like he's not lived in Charlotte for like 10 years or something. Like, the internet, while it helps connect everyone, it also makes it harder to kind of know where like people
Yeah.
are in the world now. So I didn't
Yeah.
know that
Oh
you'd
yeah.
actually left Charlotte for a while and went back.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Um
No big deal. Yeah.
no,
I
no,
just
no.
went and came back. Yeah.
No, so it's like I'm constantly toying with and talking to people about like, if in the next year or something I can go to be in Fort Mill, because that's where my mission agency is based out of,
Hmm.
South Carolina, and not far from Charlotte. And I'm talking to people all the time, like, hey, maybe in the next year I can be there and see each other. Oh, I live in Oklahoma now, or something. It's like just everyone I knew at some place of my life, doesn't necessarily still live there just because that's the last place I know them from. You know what I mean? Like the
Yeah.
internet,
Yeah.
the
That's right.
internet can
Yeah.
kind of make you forget
You
these kinds of
forget.
things.
Yeah. Because you
But
just see them. Yeah.
yeah, because I could talk to the same person. I could talk to somebody in Toronto and another person in New York and another person in Pensacola. The
Yeah.
internet makes them all the same distance away in that sense,
Yeah.
which has
Yeah.
always been something I've loved about having calls like this and doing conversations.
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
but I wrote down, I remember when you graduated or you were close to it or you hit some milestone like that, and you published on Facebook something about how, it's never too late, to start.
Hmm.
If you're, there's not this kind of like time frame on getting an education that you might
Yeah.
want, that it's
Yeah.
never too late. And that was years and years ago, but I remember at the
It
time,
was. Yeah.
we felt old or something, and that
Yeah.
and you were validating that this it's never too late to start something. And
Yep.
I bet you're saying like, of course not now, after a lot of the success you've seen and the things you've learned and done.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, I started school. I think I was in my early 30s when I started at community college. I didn't know the path. I didn't have it all mapped out, and figured out what I was going to do. But I knew I wanted to start. And so that's what I did. And in community college, this might be kind of like somebody might listen to this and be like, well, I don't know if this really applies. But like if you think it through, like for your kids or whatever, um, having gone down the path, I can give a interesting perspective on that. So if any of your listeners are out there, just hang in there with me for a quick second. And I know a lot of our friends, they don't go the path of higher education. I don't think that was really, looking back, to be truthful, it wasn't something that was, I think, looked up to or appreciated when we were at Fire in those days, right? Because it was always like the American dream must die and revolution and what's the point of having a nice house and kids and all that kind of stuff, and then you just gotta die, and like what's the point of all that? Like we need to go out and burn out for Jesus, and there's nothing wrong with that. I get that mentality. So in some respects, people can think, what was the point of that? They're all liberal. They just want to convert you from conservative to ultra liberal and all this kind of stuff. So my experience was different. I went to community college. I was kind of in the mix. Like I was in my mid 30s, and you had some kids who were literally 18 getting their associates at the same time of graduating high school. They call it an early college program. And you have other folks in there who were like literally in their 50s or whatever, taking like calculus 1 and all that. So they were in there for whatever reason they were in there for. So you had a very broad range. And then I finished up, good grades, all that stuff, transferred, got to Chapel Hill. And actually at the time when I started community college, I was actually really sick. People might remember that I had intestinal issues and all that. So I went through a major surgery. And then about 2 weeks later to fix all that. Then about 2 weeks later, my first son was born. And then like that same week or something like that, I actually started my second semester at community college. We moved. So I was married, obviously to Amy. Some people might remember her from the Fire days, but the point is we were married for a couple of years, and we moved to Chapel Hill. We lived in student family housing on campus. We had our second child there. When I got there, I realized that if you were 25 or older, you were considered what's called non-traditional, meaning you came like you have a different background. So a lot of guys and gals would be like military. So they're non-traditional because they went to the military for a couple of years, they got out, and they're coming to school there now. So they may be 26 or 27. That is ancient because in that setting, because most of the students come straight out of high school, or maybe they take a gap year, go travel or whatever, trying to figure out life, and then they come to school. And they are usually, I think it's at the time was like 1 in 10 students there was either not valedictorian, but like top 10% of their class. And so the students you compete with in school are extremely academically intelligent, bright, et cetera, or they're sports, superstars or whatever the case may be. So it was extremely difficult. I was there in school. I had a chip on my shoulder in a sense because I always felt like I stood out, that I was older than everybody else. And I was, and I did, but I was never treated differently than anybody else. But so for me to say that it's never too late, it wasn't something that I went through and was like, oh, this is easy. It's never too late. You can start, no problem. My wife will tell you that every single day I battled the thoughts of like major imposter syndrome and major, like, I don't belong here. I'd stick out. Everybody's like looking at me. I go to job interviews. I was asked 3 times in 3 different job interviews how old I was. Like literally, I could have sued one of the companies, but so it was just because I stuck out. I was getting my undergraduate degree and in my mid 30s there at Carolina. I was older than the students getting their MBAs, and had less corporate work experience. So I was like sweating bullets. Like, how am I going to make this work? This doesn't make any sense. It was extremely frustrating. So for me to have gone through,
what I took away, or I always understood or thought you meant, was more like, it's not like if you don't do something, like higher education in your life, if you don't do it by a certain time in life, it's too late. You better, there's no point or something. Like, I think you came across clear that that's not the type of thing you were saying, but I totally get you on the imposter syndrome or, it was
bad.
I had a lot of that, like at Fire, or when I would, come back for mission conferences, or, I always felt like, man, someone's going to find me out and realize I shouldn't have gotten in here, like, I had that like something all the time.
That. Yeah.
And then,
but it's
that, sorry.
No, I was going to say, it's back to the it's never too late thing. So it isn't, like the way I thought through and what got me through that was, if it takes me 5 years or whatever, 4 years or whatever to get through school, then I'm going to be 36 or 37 by the time I finish up. I'm going to be there regardless, like, unless I pass away or die or whatever, then I'm going to be 37. So why not have gone through that, at least have something to show for it, and then use that as a stepping stone into the next part of my life, and use that, because you should use it. If you went to school, there's a reason for it, right? Use that to open up doors for yourself to get a job. So that's what my thought process was. So even somebody in their 40s or whatever, and some of those people in their 50s, it doesn't mean you have to go to like the top school and all that, but go and do it. Tackle whatever it might be, because it's not too late, even if you're a bit older or feel older or think you might be older. But that was, didn't mean to cut you off there, but that was the thought process.
No, I get it. And, I wrote down this little note about the higher education. And, I remember when I was in high school, it might surprise you to hear this, that I was like lazy, I just barely passed everything. And, and then I took a gap year, like I took a year off after high school to just work and save up money. And that's what was going on in my life whenever I applied to go to Fire and stuff. And I remember filling out the application, like, kind of like writing this small essay saying, like, if you look at my transcripts, you'll see like I barely passed everything, but I really, I don't know, I failed, this class because like I read my Bible all the time and pray and don't want to, attend class, and I whatever. And like I forget how I felt going in, like I'm probably not going to get in. And then I get there and it was like not an academic place at all. And I don't say that disparagingly, but
no, it's fine. No,
it was more of your spiritual formation and your spiritual life and that kind of stuff. And I remember every class I had in high school, I had like a major paper to do. And then I get to Fire, and in that first year, the class is like, they're teaching you how to do a paper, an exegesis paper. And then the next semester it was like a research paper. And that's it, like one paper for the whole semester. And I don't think I had any class that was like a lower grade than 80% or something, or 83 or something. And I remember feeling to myself like, man, if I could go and tell the 18-year-old, 19-year-old me that it's not whatever you're fearing it's going to be. It's something else. There's other things
Yeah.
like, like other challenges, and then after that, it took me years. I think it was like when I lived in Holland and I was living on support, and then transitioned to being back in Canada for a while and then going to Peru. And Dan Slavin, who I started this podcast with, when he came off the field and he went to school, I started thinking I started having that imposter syndrome. Like, am I going down the wrong path for my own life? Or like, was this whole revolution and going on the mission field and this kind of stuff, was that like a stupid idea? And and I have to wrestle with my own journey. Like, well, no, of course not for me. For now,
Yeah.
for the time being, I'm being obedient. And I thought I'd be here like 2 or 3, 4 years, maybe. Like when you're in your 20s, 3 years is long term in your thinking. And then I didn't know exactly what I would do next. But like, if you told me then that I'd be sitting here in 2022 on a podcast talking to you and still living in Peru, I would have been like, whoa, that's just far down the road to wrap my head around. And some listeners, but maybe not many, know. And then I think you do from just chatting over the years. So like I've not done higher education for myself yet. Like, I'm not against it. I don't know how that looks or how I'd go about it. But I came to a point where I needed to think of business and ways to finance myself on the mission field outside of traditional, you raise support, you're a missionary and you go collect support from people who believe in the vision you have for like the mission you're doing. And I just always sucked at it, like that imposter syndrome. Like I was just, I remember Dr. Peters at Fire, basically telling me like, you're gonna have to come off the field and raise like X amount more money. And I'm like, okay, bye. or whatever, like making websites for people or ghostwriting for this business guy like 10 years ago and stuff, and just doing things from my laptop to fund myself. And it was like, I would much rather do something and get people to pay me to do it. Like, I'd rather do that than to just ask people for money. And that was that. So me and you have had little chit chats and things over the years, and or voicemail messages where I've like vented some of my self-doubts or things to you, and you've been encouraging or whatever. And so that's how I knew, like, whenever I pick up this podcast again, and if you're still game, like I wanted to chat, not like, I'm going to dump on you and have a personal thing and record it. But that's kind of where, like, I wanted to see like what's going to happen with this conversation then, if we come at that. Because we both came. So we both come out of that atmosphere where, we think Jesus is going to come soon and there's going to be this big revival or whatever exactly. I can't really remember anymore how my outlook was, but and that's kind of even where I started the podcast. Like, me and Dan were probably really still steeped in that at the time. And and in my case, it was more like, okay, no, I need to settle. I need to, I'm having kids now. I got 3 girls, my wife just took out. I need to think of ways that I'm going to be, because me and you've gotten some of the same emails from people of like, for, support or some emergencies and stuff. And I always hated the idea of having to do that myself. And I could sell myself. I could sell, in this case, writing or audiobooks. I would rather sell myself for a service than sell myself for a vision, right? Like, Eric Gilmore used to always tell me, a vision comes before provision. And that's part of the thing. Like, if people see what you're doing and they want to sow in it. And so I'm steeped in that world, but I hate aspects of it. And so that's where I got into like, well, I want to help people write books, because that's still kingdom and spreading the kingdom and helping people spread messages. I love if there was a better way to monetize, like doing a podcast, or if I'm, taking people's books and getting to narrate. And, I've had people tell me in the last year, I've listened to so-and-so's book over and over again, and to, God's done this, or I've experienced that in my prayer closet because of it. And I'm like, I got to be the voice. And so like the person's absorbing these ideas and getting this information in them, and it's my voice they're doing it with. And I'm just a vessel. I'm not. So anyway, I'm rambling a bit. I don't mean to, but that's kind of like my parallel or my off the train track kind of, how my journey went
Yeah.
with getting away from, there's definitely nothing wrong with higher education. I heard someone
No.
say I'm not against higher education because I see no advantage to being stupid
Yeah.
or
Right. Right.
uneducated. And so
No,
anyway,
it's
I'm sure you've got some
you
thoughts
got
on any of those points.
yeah. I mean, so education first off doesn't have to be a 4-year degree, an MBA or a PhD or whatever. Education can be a vocation. It can be military training, apprenticeship, something like that, right? It could be self-taught, where there's so many courses and things you can get on Teachable or whatever, whatever course you want to get and learn about whatever topic you want to learn about. So real estate investing or whatever it might be, you can get that online and learn that way. So even when I was at Chapel Hill, we talked about that. Like, hey, this is not for everybody. Like, not everybody's supposed to get a 4-year degree because you're better off doing X, Y, and Z. So you see a lot of that. Like I have Facebook friends who just post like education is dumb. Like, like I'm not paraphrasing here, but like I don't really care. Like, because I went through it, I understand it. But I do want to have my doctor educated. I want my lawyer to be educated. I want my financial advisor to be educated. At least in those aspects. So there is a place for it, obviously. And some kids don't know what they want in life, and it's okay to go and or people in general, and not just kids, but like people in general. They don't know they need something, some jobs. If you just need a job, there's a barrier to entry, and that barrier to entry is a 4-year degree. So you spend that time getting it, and now you can apply for whatever job and not be turned down because you don't meet the basic requirements. It's also interesting because you have a different view on the world. You have a wider view, I think. If you go to a school that teaches critical thinking skills and those sorts of things, right? There are some classes that are going to try to indoctrinate you, of course. But even in my econ classes, I was an econ major. We read Marx, we read Engels, we read Marx Engels, we read Hayek, we read these different guys, we read Adam Smith, and we always looked at things from an objective viewpoint. So socialism, all that stuff versus capitalism, et cetera. So use critical thinking skills and debate things, and it's great. So it doesn't have to change you or sway you or dissuade you from your faith. That's
Right.
far from the truth. So, but yeah, as far as having a skill, whatever it is, I think I think it's better to do that than go and raise support. And like just hands down, like if you can go and you get your accounting degree or whatever, your CPA designation, and you can bring some of those skills to whatever country you're going to, that's worth it. Right. I mean, that's completely worth it. If you can do other things, overseas, like what you're doing, leverage the skill of building websites. I'm not saying you're doing that, but like people
Not anymore.
leverage the
Not in a
skill
long
of building
time.
websites. Yeah. Right. Doing something like that, where you're actually bringing some value to the marketplace and value to other people's lives. You're making a living from doing it. You feel like you feel good doing that. Right. Versus going out and
Right.
asking for support,
Well, when I
So
first
yeah.
started here, it was like things that I had figured out and learned how to do for myself because I wanted, right? Like I wanted a website or I wanted a place to write. So like in the 2000s, like I didn't know about self-publishing books or stuff like that. But my third year at Fire, when we were in, when we were in Charlotte, that's when I started my blog. And there was this other missionary who the last time I looked her up online, I thought she'd gone off the deep end and stuff. And I don't know what she writes about anymore, but like conspiracy theories and stuff or whatever. And, I'm not against all of them, but some of them are stupid. Anyway, so, that's where I got the idea, like a blog. I want one. I need to do one. And it specifically just like an outlet and a place to write, and somebody will read it. I didn't anticipate or think of it like a place to have an audience or whatever, or a platform or things, but it was like okay, an outlet. And that started then. And I'm saying that to say eventually whenever I made my own website or stuff like that, I'd have people start approaching me and asking if I could help them do stuff. And I'm like eventually latching onto the idea, well, for money, you know what I mean? Like I'll help you if you'll compensate me, And so it's
Yeah.
like I stumbled onto it that way. Or I'm having a call with a guy once, and he basically said like, I would happily pay you like $500 to help me set up my podcast. Like I
Yeah.
want to do a podcast. I was like stuff that like I figured out or I learned how to do, or I wasted a lot of time, not wasted, but spent a lot of time Googling and figuring out. And in those days, not so much YouTube videos like you would go to
Yeah.
now. And okay, so somebody would rather not have to do all that for themselves, but pay someone to do it for them. And it was like, it took me, years. It took me a little longer than it should have to kind of clue in that that's the key to, okay, taking things I'm good at and I've gotten good at from repetition or just from figuring out,
Mm-hmm.
and people who have more money than they do time, that
Yeah. Yeah.
okay, so how do I find those kinds of people? And like I wrote a couple of things down. You said like the barrier to entry for some professions and stuff is your job or your, but another thing that I'm kind of like, okay, this is what I stumbled into, is evidence of success or
Mm-hmm.
proof that you know how to do something.
Yep.
And in our culture, an education is oftentimes a big part of that, but other times it
Yep.
can be like the apprenticing, or it can be the just self-taught at something, and you can prove it. You can demonstrate like you know how to do something, and people are willing to hire you
Absolutely.
to do it. And
Yeah.
so those are just
Absolutely.
some thoughts you provoked me to on that one.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I was talking to a guy yesterday who's going to help me do some videography and some other stuff, but he showed me a video that he was working on and did. I didn't ask him if he had a 4-year degree. He just showed me that he actually had done the stuff. So that's what matters, right? Have you done the stuff? And then in some cases, for somebody who wants to get a job and they feel like that's what they need to do, or that's what they want to do, or whatever the case may be, like that's just the next step for them. Um, Sometimes that barrier to entry is, okay, have you completed anything before? Being a 4-year degree, or did you stick with it? How did you do during that time? Like there's all kinds of things you can talk about within education that goes in 10 different directions, but the point that opens up so many doors. But the point is that education doesn't have to look like a university or college degree. It can be, hey, I taught myself how to start a podcast. I've started a podcast. I have X number of listeners. I can help you start a podcast, and here's how much it costs, and here's the how much time it will take. Like, okay, great. Like, help me do it. I can afford that. Like that's as simple as that. That's a business there.
Right.
And then obviously the idea of it, whatever it is, your product. So that's your product, like teaching people to do, or helping people start their podcast or whatever. That's your product, consulting with them on
That's
it.
I abandoned that and didn't like
No,
it.
I just mean like a person. Yeah.
Yeah, but
Like a person in
that's
general.
definitely where the light bulb went off. Like, somebody would
Yeah.
pay me to do something I know how to do.
Yeah.
You know,
So then like people out there, I know like some missionaries will make trinkets or whatever and sell those. Well, is that really a viable product? Do people want that? Can I go down to Walmart and buy the same thing at better quality? I understand I might buy it because it's like, and it's you. It's not about the product in that sense. It's about what you're doing and the vision, and it's you, right? And so that's why I'm going to buy your thing. But if you can find a product that people want, and people want to start podcasts, people want videography, people want websites, people want whatever it might be, consulting about your marriage or something like that, whatever it might be. Do people want that product? Do you have a good product? And if you do, then obviously you can build a business and keep yourself on the mission field and keep it sustainable that way,
you're
versus
reminding me about the trinkets.
asking people for donations. Go ahead.
Well, you reminded me about the trinkets because I sold these bracelets. They're probably I probably have the material in this very desk. I just don't want to go looking for it while I talk to you.
Yeah.
Of those pennies that Ray Comfort, his ministry,
Yeah.
sells with the 10 Commandments
Yeah.
on them.
Yeah.
And I always bought those things. Like I'd have those cards that say like,
Mm-hmm.
put your thumb here, and if you're a good person, the red box will
Mm-hmm.
change color. I
Mm-hmm.
always had those. Like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
introverted and I want to evangelize and share the gospel, right? But I'm introvert, so I always loved having little things that were like icebreakers and conversation starters
Yeah.
and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
That just, I'd be at a factory, or I'd be doing some kind of job for months between semesters at Fire or something, and I'm just like itching to talk to people. I'm itching to convey, have an outlet of things I'm learning in the Bible and whatever. And I'm around people who probably
Yeah.
don't believe the Bible, so it's like, so I was always buying like those fake $1 million bills and stuff like that.
Yeah.
In the
Yeah.
Canadian version anyway. And
Yeah.
but there's this woman at a job who said like, oh, you can make bracelets with these pennies. And she, drilled holes in, one, and showed it to me. And I'm like, but why would I do that? I don't want to wear it. And she's like, no, but like, I'll buy you like a bunch of these. I'll buy you these pennies and drill holes in them. And you can make bracelets to sell for your, because I was going to Holland. I was going to go to, back then it was, to go to Holland for my internship. And
Yeah.
it was like, like somebody else who's not even a believer, who's this woman at a factory I'm working in, is like,
Yeah.
she's got this entrepreneurial idea for me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I felt like that was one of the first times in my life I'm like, don't be so stupid to like ideas people who might not know Jesus have for
Yeah.
me just because they
Yeah.
don't know Jesus. And so somehow they aren't anointed ideas or something like that. Like he could be giving me brilliant. So anyway, I made like $900 or $1,000. Just, I, I still have like a bag of these where I then went and bought copper chain or some kind of, material, made these
Yeah.
bracelets, and I went and I sold them for like, at first I was doing them for $10 a piece to people
Mm-hmm.
at school, at fire, at church, whatever. And then I forget who it was, but I think it was Joel Crumpton. He said to me,
Mm-hmm.
Steve, don't put a price on them. Instead, sell them for whatever people are willing to pay. Um, so what he meant was like, let people give you a donation for them. And if it's
Mm-hmm.
$5, it's $2, or it's $50 or whatever. And so then the next four people I sold one to gave me 150. No, it totaled like $125 or something. So here I
Mm.
was selling them at 10 a piece. I would have needed to sell 10. And you want
Mm-hmm.
to talk about the math and doing your how much
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
costs to buy, but
Yeah.
so then I'm like, I'm selling them for um so I hit four for 125. The math of that is more generous. And
Yeah.
so that seed stayed with me for years, that idea to not sell um at a fixed price necessarily, but what would people be willing to pay for something? And so
Yeah.
I might sound like a slimy snake oil salesman that way, but no, I mean, if somebody's willing to pay this price and it's higher than the price I would have charged, then
Mm-hmm.
there's no, like, it took me a lot of guilt and self-doubting and um, what do you want to call it? Imposter syndrome to
Mm-hmm.
like accept the idea that I'm not doing anything wrong if I'm able to charge my service or something, and people are willing to pay like that price. It's like I'm not fooling anyone or something. It's like there's nothing, it took a long time, maybe years of reaching that point where it's like I don't have to feel guilt. Like even just this week, I had someone, he kept wanting something from me, and I told him, okay, well, here's the price, and he voicemailed me saying, well, that's premium. It's like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
well, that's how I'm charging. So that's premium.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't do the math, to hire you to do that. And I'm like, I could look at my bank account and say, well, I should lower my price. I should do, or I could say like, well, I got other people in my life willing to pay me that, so I shouldn't feel guilty, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, it took that woman, going all the way back to this, having someone else give me an idea, and then someone else tell me how to price it, and I never told people a price ever again for some things, and eventually had to kind of, I learned the hard way, I need to maybe negotiate or have some kind of base for things. I'd format people's ebooks, and then I'll hand it back to you because I'm going in all these different directions. But I'd have people who self-publish a book, and then they say, hey, I don't know how to make an ebook. Can you do that for me? What's your price? And I'd say, I'll do it for a love offering, whatever
Uh-huh.
you, and sometimes that bit me in the butt. And people give me like
Right.
20, somebody pay me like 25 bucks, 25 bucks,
Yeah.
and then they're like demanding and very nitpicky, and then I have these other two missionary, not missionary but ministers I won't name, and like every time I was doing one of their books, they would just send me 500 bucks, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, and I'd say like, and then I start feeling like, well, you paid me all this money, and I start having this guilt, and I do extra things or explain things. They're like, I don't care, just be blessed. I trust your judgment, but the
Yeah.
people who paid me a little bit, they were always the ones who were like acting like they'd paid me 500, you
Yeah.
know,
It's a waste of
and,
time to
and
work
then
with those
the
people.
five.
Yeah.
So it's like I learned along the way, like there's the School of Hard Knocks and other, coaching, whatever,
Mm-hmm.
that low price is bad, not just for,
Mm-hmm.
you don't reach goals, but the type of people who can afford a low price compared to the type of people who will pay you a high price. There's a different
Yeah.
mentality, and
It's a
I don't know,
different person.
a different relationship to their money. So like
Mm-hmm.
the people who pay you dirt cheap have always been the hardest clients to work with. And then the people who've, like, I just chased after a guy months ago, or maybe 6 weeks ago. I was
Mm-hmm.
ghostwriting for, and he disappeared. He ghosted me, and he's like, "Oh, I forgot to tell you, I've stopped doing that book. I've stopped doing that book." It's like, oh, I hope you don't want a refund or something. He goes, no, 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 just consider yourself blessed. The Lord spoke to me that we shouldn't do that book. It's like, and it was like the highest paying client I'd ever had in, that I
Yeah.
began 2021 with. And, here we are this time later. And I'm like, oh my goodness. But I've had other people who are like, hey, you said this would be done on this date. I was like, yeah, well, that was assuming you were going to do this and you were going to give me what I needed. And like the
Yeah.
cheap people would hunt me down for the dumbest things or call me on a Saturday morning or something. And then the people who are like the more affluent clients have been a lot more like, yeah, I trust your judgment.
Yeah.
I'm grateful you're working with me, and
Yeah.
anything to
Yeah.
help a brother. And so anyway, a lot of things I've learned along that journey. But anyway, you look like you've got light bulbs going off.
No,
And
I was
things.
just thinking. No, I was just thinking that makes sense. Like it's a waste of time to work with people who don't meet some minimum threshold. That's when you mentioned that, I think about that in our business where our
Well,
customers
you specifically provoked me to think of that with the idea of trinkets, and when
yeah,
you're raising
trinkets. Yep.
support and people sell something, which I'm not against. I think it's a great idea, but just
Yeah.
I had this other journey I've gone on with that
Oh
as
yeah.
a
Yeah.
baseline.
Well, yeah, the whole with that was like, what's the relation of what you're offering? I just wanted to mention something about the product itself. Whereas what you're offering obviously has value in the marketplace because you have people who are willing to purchase your services, right? Generally speaking, trinkets um, that like it's interesting, but they're giving money to you, a donation or to a person because it's mostly them, it's their vision or whatever it is. So they'll pay $150 for a 10 Commandments penny, with 2 strings attached to it or whatever. So because they're giving above and beyond because it's the vision that you have. So that's great, but probably not sustainable in the long run. Whereas if you have self-education or whatever, helping people do audiobooks or whatever it might be, whatever a person might be doing, there's probably more value to that long-term in the marketplace and people pay you more for it. So yeah. And then with the customer thing, that's funny because we try to have properties that are in good areas, good incomes because of that very reason. People who just aren't willing to pay or whatever, or more cheap, or maybe don't have the means or whatever the case may be. They're a different type of customer. And I'm not talking about believer, non-believer. I'm just talking about people in general. And we don't want to chase down late and apply late fees and have to chase people to collect on what they've owed to us, et cetera. So people who are generally more affluent pay bills on time. They are concerned with their credit. They want to make sure things are taken care of properly. And obviously they want the service also that they're paying for, but that's besides the point. So yeah, it's a different mindset, a different personality, a different
Right.
person.
Well, since I've got you here talking about it, I remember one of your posts a few years ago on Facebook about how there's nothing inherently holy about poverty, but
No,
there's also nothing inherently holy about wealth. Like there's not. Anyway, I know what you meant by it, and I think, oh man, I've always remembered that would make a good conversation, because I think in
yeah,
especially the circles we came out of in, um, when I look back at my time in Pensacola and then in Charlotte, I mean, there were some pretty affluent people among us, like in the church and stuff. And
mm-hmm.
but we're here, we are in the school, we're around other broke 20 somethings getting
Students.
educated. The macaroni and cheese, when you buy it here, it's not common here like in North America. So
Yeah.
it might be imported, or it might be this lesser quality, and it's the equivalent of paying like $6 or $7 for a box, or if
Wow.
you were to compare what it's like for a Peruvian to buy it. So it's not this staple food of like cheap, like it was for us, where you go to Walmart and you for like $1 buy 3 boxes of
Yeah.
no name macaroni and stuff. So like
Yeah.
we're around people like that, and hours and hours a day. So it's like that's kind of our culture. But there was still some. I now I look back on it, a pretty affluent and successful business type of people in our culture, in our midst. And but there's still, I think, this idea, not even just because we came from fire, but there's all over the church, different denominations and stuff, that like it's bad to want to be success. Or let me back up. I, you and me know someone who's very successful and wealthy, and I remember approaching a few people about doing their mastermind, and remember having someone say, well, he must have like forsaken his first love or something if he's that wealthy now. I was like, well, why? What, you know,
Hmm.
why does him being successful mean he must not be following Jesus anymore? Like, how
That's
do you
interesting.
know? But like, how do you know that
Yeah.
that big house, that business, his however many employees back then, and I'm sure it's more now, um, how come that means bad and not good? You know,
That's
not
the
blessing.
dumbest thing I've ever heard of. Right. Yeah, that's silly. That's
So
completely silly. How many homeless people have you walked by on the street that treat you like garbage because they didn't give you a dollar, or that are greedy, or that are evil towards each other, or whatever? There's plenty. We were just actually on vacation in Savannah, Georgia. We were in a park. Homeless guy comes up to me, asks for money. Just to make a very long story short, based upon his approach and everything he was telling me, I knew he was lying. So I actually told him no and wanted him to leave because it was literally just me, my wife, and kids, and him. And so it was almost like a weird, threatening situation. He looked one way, looked the other way, looked back at me, about a 5-second pause, which felt like an eternity, right? And then he just rode off, and he was swearing under his breath. So you tell me, it's righteous to be poor? I mean, come on, that has nothing to do with any as far as your heart condition, whether you're wealthy or you're poor, has nothing to do with anything. We can bring
right.
it back to the Bible too. I think that's important. But like just on the surface, that kind of thought of like he must have forsaken his first love is just silly
Well,
talk.
but then who might be saying that? Like, what's their relationship to money? What's their,
Mm-hmm.
like, I don't know. I'm not judging.
Yeah.
But one of my favorite preachers has this story about how, like, he was this successful um, business person for many years in some profession related to real estate, and then when he became a believer, he sold his business and became a truck driver and
Mm-hmm.
downsized and just downsized, became a
Mm-hmm.
more modest person, because he believed,
Mm-hmm.
he'll tell you, or he preaches, erroneously, that he used to believe, like, you couldn't love Jesus and
Mm-hmm.
have stuff. Like, you couldn't be affluent or wealthy and love
Hmm.
Jesus, because of his misunderstanding of things in the Bible, like the love of money is the root of all evil, and
Yeah.
maybe there was a snare there for him, but I've never forgotten his story, that, like, he basically sold his business and downsized, and then over time kind of unlearned what he had been thinking. And I
Yeah.
just always remember that, and I can introduce you to people who think, no, I don't need very much, I just need enough to get by,
Yeah.
um or that kind of mentality, and living on the mission field for a long time, and especially when you start out and you're dependent on support, you are probably more susceptible to that kind of belief. Like, if you're dependent on other people for your support, and I'm not talking about like welfare or something, but like in
Yeah.
ministry or in some kind of capacity where there's the mechanism in place where donations or support is what finances you, then
Mm-hmm.
it can be easier to feel like, I better not be too wasteful and too um whatever. And obviously you need to be
Yeah.
mindful of the people you're serving and who are paying your bills. But I
Yeah.
remember when I first came here on the mission field, there was this other girl I knew, and it was like she would always try to, like, Jesus juke me. Like, if I went to Starbucks or something, and she'd be like, that frappuccino you bought could feed, like, two people for a day in this culture.
Yeah.
And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay. Or, I brought
Yeah.
her to my leader's house, and brought her and her boyfriend to my leader's house, and she would just be like, you live in a house this big? It's like, it's not even that, like, big in hindsight.
Yeah.
And
Yep.
and I'm not naming names, but, like, now this person is not the same as back then, and is very
Sure.
generous or whatever.
Sure.
But I always remember stuff like, oh, better not let this person know that I went and I ate out instead of whatever.
Right.
And
Right.
there was just this Debbie Downer Jesus juke about everything. And I
That's
and I
funny.
learned and I learned over the years, like, talking to her and kind of reminiscing on this stuff, that, like, she basically had that kind of, like, well, people are paying for me to be here, people are supporting us, and people are giving their hard-earned money to believe in my vision and finance me to do what I'm here to do. So I'm like, yeah, I felt guilty, like, if I wasted any money, or if I did anything that was, like, not just the bare necessities. And
Yeah.
then years later, her and her husband, they put me in a decent not a, you know, like a Ramada Inn or something, but like put me in a hotel
Yeah.
and pay for me to come, you know, minister to their part of the country and stuff. And didn't have that mentality anymore. But
Yeah.
there can be this kind of like, if you have more than enough, then why? Or the suspicion, or I don't have, but you
Mm-hmm.
do. So why? If I'm,
Mm-hmm.
rather than looking at other indicators like success, or in my case, like I had a guy a little while ago ask me to format his book, and I told him my price, and then he wrote back this nasty email saying he asked other people and my rate was higher than all of them. And he was like, you know, so I'm going to go to this other guy. I was like, well, that's fine. That's, you go do that. You didn't need to write a nasty message. But I'm
Yeah.
thinking to myself, that means that other guy needs to have like 4 more clients to, you know, to make
Yeah.
the or whatever
To
the
make it
amount of
work.
money. So it's like,
Yeah.
why do you have to lash out at me for that? If I was going to do this for you, I wanted to be paid that, you know. You could
Yeah.
just say,
It's a free, you don't have to do it. Like,
and
what does it
like
matter to you? Then go in a different direction.
or like, you know, I mentioned to you the guy saying to me, well, your price is premium. And when I listened to
Mm-hmm.
the voicemail, everything he said was about himself, not me. Like, he was very generous and careful with his words, and telling me like to not feel guilty for
Mm-hmm.
charging him or giving him that quote. He's just not gonna, he doesn't see it, you know, fitting into his business right now. And I thought
Sure.
that's an affluent kind of minded person, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Using the calculator rather than the emotions. And so anyway,
No, you
I
could
did,
charge whatever you want to charge for
yeah.
whatever your services are. Yeah.
But
There's nobody telling you
struck
can't
me is
do
how,
something.
right, but what struck me is how edifying he was to me in his
Got it.
declining to work with me. Like, you know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Got
Like
it. Got it.
wanting to encourage
Yeah.
me and edify me. And you know, I could name names and show you his website and stuff, and you're like, okay, he looks like he's on top of his game. But I'm saying that to say,
Sure.
and because we're coming up on the time I've got you for, I don't want to talk too much, but I also know I have few people I can have like this kind of give and take with, you know,
Oh
on this
yeah.
topic. So
Yeah. Dude, we were broke, right? So you go back to like the fire days and all that, we were broke, right? Whatever we got paid, we were missing paychecks. Some of the staff was at that time. We were in Pensacola. We missed one or two here in Charlotte. And then like a couple of years after I quit working at Fire, I had heard at least once or twice that they'd missed paychecks again because maybe for whatever the reason was. So there was a mentality like if you're missing paychecks, you're quote unquote sacrificing for the kingdom, or if you're in the mission field or whatever, you're taking donations. I can completely not relate, but I completely understand how you could feel like you're wasting people, quote unquote, wasting people's money if you went and bought a Starbucks with some of your you know, donations. I completely understand that. Like that makes a lot of sense because you are in a sense, I, you know, kind of gave you this vision. This is what you're giving to, and now you're giving to my Starbucks fund. You know, like so I get that.
even though it's like $3 or
And,
$4, but because
yeah,
$3 or $4
yeah,
is like
exactly.
20 here. So,
Yeah, exactly. So it's a I get the tension, right? So there is a pro and a con to everything. And I guess some of the cons of doing the donation based ministry and going out there and being supported that way, that's one of the cons is you deal with that guilt on the inside or that thought in the back of your mind of how you're stewarding those finances. So totally understandable. But back to the thing on wealth and that whole situation, man, it is. I was completely broke, right? Got married. We were fairly broke at the time too, getting married, and we had like decent. We were never like starving or anything like that, but like we went through really hard times being in school and all that. It's a source of like stress in a marriage. It's a source of stress not being able to say, okay, oh, we need to really budget and can't go buy a Starbucks, even though it's only $4 or whatever here, you know, because we need to be able to pay X number of bills and have food for the week or whatever it was, and trying to budget all those things out. Like that's really difficult to live like that day in and day out. Even in a Christian believing marriage where you should have the fruit of the spirit and all this kind of stuff. Well, sometimes, man, you don't, right? And it adds extra stress. Back to, so that in and of itself is a whole nother, you know, conversation and topic on marriage and money and finance and stuff. But just generally speaking in wealth, I went through, as you were talking, I pulled up a spreadsheet that I have that I went through. It's like part of my daily like Bible study stuff. And so this is stuff I took down a while back, going through the book of Proverbs on just wealth and money and riches and whatever. And Proverbs doesn't, some people will delineate, well, if you're rich, it's this. And if you're wealthy, it really means this. And like, I'm not talking about that. I'm not making that distinction between those two words. And I don't think Proverbs does or the Bible does either. It just talks about wealth and being rich or being poor. So anyway, I'm just looking through some of the notes I took, I have corresponding verses so people can look at it this way. And this helped me kind of clarify the thoughts on wealth. Okay. So wealth in Proverbs versus like worldly wealth and the outcomes of that. If you start like in Proverbs chapter 10, wealth is the reward of diligent hands, right? Understanding that wealth can protect from financial disaster. Wealth ultimately comes from God's blessings. In the world, wealth is the fruit of my labor. In the world, wealth is the greatest pursuit. In Proverbs, righteousness is a greater pursuit than wealth, right? But then it says in Proverbs 11, the wealthy are generous. The wealthy are generous and business-minded. Righteousness, again, it's a reminder, righteousness is greater than riches and wealth. The wealthy can look poor. The poor can look wealthy, right? And so there's a whole like thing that I can go through on this, that going through the entire book of Proverbs. But even then there's something more important than wealth, and that's your reputation. Everybody can build a good reputation. Not everybody is in a position to build like exorbitant amounts of wealth or anything like that. But you can always have a good reputation. And the Bible considers a reputation that is good to be greater than someone who is wealthy or having a lot of money. So there is a perspective to be seen there. If you fast forward to the New Testament, right? So Jesus talks about storing up your treasures in heaven, not on earth, where moth and rust destroy. Timothy talks about, we just mentioned it earlier on, about the love of money being the root of all evil. But prior to that, he talks about taking care of widows in the church. How do you take care of them? You can obviously go and take care of their home and all that kind of stuff. But at least in those days, in that context, probably by financial blessings, financial donations, helping them out, in that regard, because back then, my assumption is women didn't really have a chance to go get educated. So there was a different way of living in life back then. If you were an orphan or a widow, life was very different for you. It was much more difficult for you to have the things you need to have your daily needs met. So the church was to meet those needs. How can you meet those needs if you don't have some way of doing so, right? And so there's like almost a hierarchy of like, you pursue righteousness, you pursue a good reputation in the sight of God, because one day we're going to die and stand before him and be judged based upon what we did in this life, right? Beyond that, if you want to transition into a like a thought process, I guess, on wealth and applying, well, how do I have a good reputation and be righteous in God's sight, but then actually like have wealth and build wealth? Because that seems like a worldly pursuit, like a fleshly, sinful pursuit. Whereas Proverbs says the exact opposite, because bad times will come. You will need some money to cover certain things that pop up that you cannot control. Like in Ecclesiastes, it talks about, invest in 7 ventures and et cetera. Yes. And 8, because you don't know what's going to succeed, all those kinds of things that the Bible talks about in building wealth. So you have to ask yourself, okay, I get it. Be righteous, have a good reputation, righteous in God's sight, right? Now I'm not talking about self-righteousness or whatever, but just being righteous in God's sight, building a good reputation with outsiders, with those within the church and those outside the church, and then pursuing whether it be a career or whatever, or if you want to become a millionaire or whatever, there's nothing sinful within that. It is the product of the outcome of the actions that you take every day, the habits that you build, the career path that you choose, what you do with your life. One person wants to go be a whatever, I don't know, like they want to work in a job and they enjoy working in a job and they enjoy that hierarchy there, working for corporate America or whatever. And that's them. They love that. Okay, great. Or maybe they don't love it, but that's what they like and that's what they do. Okay, great. They make a certain amount of money as a result of the choices that they've made previous to that, whether they got an education or whether they didn't, or whether they pursued some sort of, vocational training or whether they didn't, right? The outcome of your wealth is an outcome. The result of your wealth is an outcome of the choices you make in life to get there, right? And so some people are content with that, and that's fine. Nothing wrong with that. It's okay. And then how do you, obviously, we'll talk about contentment in a second. But so if I can use just myself as an example real quick, having gone to school, I knew I wanted to make money because I knew I had this feeling, emotional situation on the inside, having not had money for so long and saw the downside of that. I knew that is not the way I'm going to live my life. And that cannot be the way God intends it to be within the context of marriage, et cetera, because there's so much stress that's placed on families as a result of that, especially if you live in a country like the United States of America, where there's so much opportunity to build a better life and go do other things. So coming out of school, I worked for a real estate firm doing commercial real estate, long story short. And in that world, you make there's different types of fees and a salary and all this kind of stuff. And based upon what you do in that world, there's a good amount of money that you can make. I'm sure a lot of people listening to this, they know someone who's a residential real estate broker. When they sell a house, they make a fee, and those fees can be pretty high. That's a result of them going to get their real estate license and then just actually literally taking the actions to be a broker every day. And that's how much you get paid to be a broker and do brokerage within residential. It's just the outcome of the choices that you made or a person made prior to that time, prior to that career path. So choices and all that are very important. Not everybody's going to have the same level of wealth. It doesn't work that way, right? I know that some people in Congress and all that want it to be that way. That's another topic. But the point is right now in this world, in the United States, the outcomes are not the same. They're not equal. So if a person chooses to do nothing and become lazy in school and not get educated and not go do anything with themselves and, flounder around or whatever, I'm not even talking about going to Bible school or anything like that. You just are a lazy person. You're not going to have anything according to the book of Proverbs. Diligence brings wealth, laziness brings poverty, right? And so like there's the famous proverb where the guy walks past the field of the sluggard and thorns had grown up and the vines basically had died and there was nothing there. A little sleep, a little slumber, a little closing of the eyes to rest, and poverty will come on you like a bandit, and scarcity like an armed man, like a robber, like a thief. It'll be there before you know it, right? So diligence, the reward of diligence is income, is some level of wealth. Now that means that wealth is different for all of us, right? And so what's wealthy to one person is not wealthy to someone else. In the United States of America, we have people who complain about the 1%, but in reality, the entire US is like the 1% to the rest of the world. So it's all relative, right? For the most part. I'm not saying that we're like the best or whatever, but just for the most part, just for perspective. So the point of that is there's different levels of what, where we're going to be in life and what we want to do. Part of it is our God-given personality. Some of us are entrepreneurially bent. Like you want to go out and do business ventures. You want to take risks. You want to build something of your own, whatever that looks like, right? And so the reward of entrepreneurship, if it's successful, if you have a good product or a good service for people or whatever, the reward of that is just happens to be people buy it and they buy a ton of it. And like you said, the right clientele are willing to pay more for it, right? And that's just the outcome of the actions you took prior to that time. And then others, they aren't created that way. My wife is a very supportive person. She does not want to be in the foreground. She wants to be in the background, right? And so, okay, great. She loves doing admin stuff. She did marketing before, putting together proposal work, and she didn't like that work specifically. But the point is that she likes being a support type person within the corporate world. And so that's great. The CEO gets paid a certain amount, and the support person, the admin person, gets paid a certain amount, but they can both be content with where they are. And it's just the outcome of personality, desire, education, diligence, etc. That's really it. That's kind of how I see it.
I wrote down some notes, but just to tag on to the last thing you were mentioning about, I love helping people with their books, and I love just the idea of if people have stuff in them, like, it's a podcast or an audiobook or a written book, and just the idea of spreading messages using tools like this. Yeah. And it dawns on me like, well, if I want people to pay me well, I need to know how to get people. Like I need, that I need to know how to prospect and get the proper leads and whatever.
Need those people. Yeah.
But I need to know how to get them, find them. And so like, I need to learn. So that's my education, if you want to call it that, is, getting to know how to prospect and how to handle sales calls, how to, I'm constantly listening to things about sales, but I came across, this one little nugget that you provoked me to think of. I can't remember the exact point, but I wrote down when you were saying was this woman, Janet Clark, I've referred to in the last podcast or two, where, she talks about how, like, if people have a bleeding neck, like they need a solution right now, like they have a bleeding neck problem, and it doesn't matter the price. They need the solution, right? They need the, and, if you're talking to the right person and you provide that solution, you solve their bleeding neck problem, then it's like, you're not going to charge peanuts, right? Like if you're smart, you're going to know, like that people are willing to pay for the solution, not for how long it took you to solve the problem. They're going to pay for. So that's been another factor in my, and maybe in this economy, it's been more challenging when people view a book as would be nice to have rather than
Mm-hmm.
a bleeding neck solution they need solved.
Mm-hmm.
But like just the other day or yesterday or whatever it was, someone was and if she's listening to this, I'm not trying to make fun or anything. Someone I know was trying to figure out something on her website, like what the feed is, like the RSS feed, which like so
Yeah.
you can put it places, and that those places will show the latest post or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
She was
Yep.
really struggling with it, couldn't figure it out. I said, look, can you just give me the password? Give me your email and password, and I'll go look. And it probably was 5 minutes of my time. It's like, what happens when you copy and paste this to where you want to put a feed? And she said, it works. And I go,
Mm-hmm.
of course it works. That's what like I don't know what struggle you're having, but I know what
Mm-hmm.
to look for. And she said, how much do I owe you? Nothing. Like I just,
Mm-hmm.
if I was gonna go and be under the hood of your site and spend time there, then I'd say, please compensate me, whatever. But
Yeah.
nothing. And so she said, like, well, what's your PayPal? At the time of listening, this might be a bad thing to admit, right? That I still use PayPal. I haven't closed my account or anything yet. And I
Oh
said,
yeah.
this is
Yeah.
this, this is my PayPal, but if you're not using it anymore and you want to, what? And so she sends me $50. $50 to
Mm.
just know what to look for in her website and find it. And she was grateful because it was something she'd spent a lot of time the day before trying to figure out, and it was worth $50 to just Steve fix it. And
Yeah.
there's probably people listening that it's like the wheels are turning, like, well, like there's something that the solution to someone's problem, and people would pay you to fix. And
Yeah.
there's that story of the guy who there's a machine that's wrong, and something's wrong with a machine in a factory, and they call in this maintenance expert. I forget the exact details, and he looks around at the machine, and then he just turns a bolt or something, and he says, all done. And they turn it back on and it's working right. And he bills them for like $20,000 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd been losing millions of dollars while the machine was off. And he bills them like $20,000. You were just here for 15 minutes,
Mm-hmm.
or no, the bill was like $1 for the bolt and, 50, whatever, a huge amount for the rest. And he's like,
Yeah.
yeah, but you're not paying me for the bolt. You're paying me for knowing where to look and
Yeah.
what to do. And there's,
Yeah.
like those kinds of
The
things have been
experience.
those kinds of
Yeah.
things have been transformative pieces of knowledge to use in my,
Yeah.
like, I may not have gone and gotten my 4-year degree at something, but I know how to fix some bleeding neck
Yeah.
problems, related
Oh
to
yeah.
people's books and whatever. So one thing I really couldn't wait to ask you once you got onto Proverbs,
Sure.
I just saw this for the first time a year ago. It's always been there, right? Like it's the Bible, it's always been there. But what do you?
Yeah. That's always happens, right?
I don't know if you have it in front of you, but in Proverbs 11, and I screenshotted this and posted it online last year whenever I found it,
Uh-huh.
because every quarter I try to read a proverb every day, like the chapter, whatever the day of the month is,
Yeah.
that chapter,
Yeah.
So every
Yeah.
quarter I go through it. It's part of my, and last year I got a Bible sent to me from Canada. I get a new translation every year, and last year's was New King James again. And I'm just
Nice.
going through it with just highlighting money, highlighting
Yeah.
business, highlighting wealth principles. That's what I
Yeah.
wanted to do with it, right? And I
Mm-hmm.
noticed this, and I like doing that with a translation or a Bible, because you start looking at things a specific way. So you find things that you never noticed before because you're looking with that lens, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
And it says, there's one who scatters yet increases more, and there's
Mm-hmm.
one who withholds more than is right, but it leads
Mm-hmm.
to poverty. So like there's
Mm-hmm.
stinginess, but then I never noticed this. It goes, the generous soul will be made rich, and he who waters will also be watered himself. The people
Mm-hmm.
will curse him who withholds grain, but
Mm-hmm.
blessing will be on the head of him who sells it, not
Willing to
gives it
sell.
away.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
like I don't know why. Like, so I've copied, I highlighted, and I've got the circle the words and whatever, and I take a picture and post it. And I got like
Yeah.
this arguing going, like, and you know what I mean? But I'm like,
Always. Doesn't matter
what do
what
you
we
do?
post.
Yeah, what
Argues.
do you do with Bible? Like it's right there. This guy
Yeah.
does like he doesn't withhold it, but he doesn't give it away either. He sells it. And
Yeah.
you could, like look at what's his face, Joseph, with the grain, and people
Yeah.
were buying it. They didn't just give it away. Like there's an economic, principle. Like you can't just give things away. You have to have some
Yeah.
give and take and sell and whatever. Anyway, I
Yeah.
was just curious if you maybe that's always been there for you, but I just was like,
No, no, I
sells
mean,
it,
those little
you know?
things. Yeah, right. There's like the little things that you notice, like, wait a second, yeah, he doesn't give it away, he sells it. So like I had that mentality back in the day too. Like, well, why don't you just give stuff to people and help them out and all that. And I get that. I understand that mentality. So I'm not disparaging it in any way, shape, or form. That's sometimes easier said than done when you're single, right? So I don't know who this person was, if people were arguing with you or whatever, but when you're married, there's you have different
Well, no,
considerations.
it
And then when
was
you look at
like
the whole of the
comments.
Bible.
Sorry,
Okay,
just to,
yeah.
it was just like people were like,
Okay.
you could, a passage like that can reveal the abundant minded and scarcity minded in your
Yeah.
Facebook world,
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway, I didn't mean to cut you off.
Yeah. No, no, that's okay. So, yeah, I mean, I think it comes probably a little bit with time that people, like you said, that one couple or the one lady who'd always Jesus juke you. And then later on, over time, she obviously didn't treat you that way. Later on, when you went to go visit or whatever it was, they took care of you, right? And so it was just there, her mindset had changed over time. I think people, I'm not saying it comes with maturity, but sometimes people in time realize that, hey, there's actually nothing wrong with turning a profit on the things that you have. That's not a sin, right? And the things that you produce, the fruit of your labor, if you have grain, you obviously worked to get it, right? You plowed the land, planted the seed, it watered, God watered it through the rain. They didn't have probably sophisticated irrigation systems like they do now. So you did a lot of things right in order to get that grain to grow. Now you're just going to give it all away. And now yourself is going to end up you yourself will end up in poverty while your grain is all gone. So the very thing God gave you to provide for you and your family is the thing that you should use to sell, right, to other people and help them out. And then obviously in the law, it says don't charge interest to your fellow Israelites. So they pay you back, of course, for what you gave to them or sold to them. So, or let them borrow. So the very thing God gave you is not the thing you should just give away for free, because that's the thing he's going to use to provide for your family, right? In my mind, I have a mindset of obviously I give, donate, all that kind of stuff. My family comes first, right? And so might be shocking to your listeners. I think you posted something recently on tithing in the last 6 months or something like that. Is that right? That was probably controversial. I saw it. I didn't comment.
At least once.
At
And
least once. Okay.
but
So
you might be thinking of when I said I've tithed and not tithed.
yeah,
Like I've
yeah,
the four things. I've had money in tithed. I've not had money in tithed. I've had money
yeah,
and not tithed, and
yeah.
I've had money and whatever. Like the four different circumstances.
Whatever.
Right?
Yeah, yeah. I got you.
And
Yep.
and it's like life has been the same like each time. You know what I mean?
Regardless.
I've had God bless me when I had nothing and he came through on time. And then
Mm-hmm.
other times it felt like he
Mm-hmm.
didn't. And then other times it's
Thank
like
God. Yeah.
I forgot to tithe or I didn't tithe. And then boom, I got like another big paycheck or something. So it's like,
Mm.
it was just more like do what you want with that information. You know, if you want to say
Mm-hmm.
you have to tithe, and I could have a conversation with you about not, I could have a conversation with you about doing it. It's like,
Yeah.
I think there's
Oh
a lot
yeah.
of information to mine. So I don't take a hard line
Absolutely.
stance, but
No.
I
Yeah.
feel like it's
Yeah.
whatever God leads someone to do. I don't think I don't like the mechanic legalistic,
Mm-mm.
track in your ledger, make sure anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. That's not, that's my viewpoint as well.
Well,
So I don't know
how
how
much
we got
time do you
on
have
that
left?
topic. I got a little
You
bit more.
my
I forgot what I was going to.
my kids are back, so it might be
Oh,
an
okay.
indication that we're going to wind up.
Okay.
So
No problem. Yeah, on the tithing thing, I guess, I don't know how we got on that, or I just thought of something related to that, but,
I interrupted
um,
you to tell you what the post was that I
yeah,
thought
because I
you
asked
referred
you
to.
about it. I
Yeah.
forgot where I was going with that. But the point is like, look, thank God God is generous to us, right? And he doesn't keep score in that regard. Oh, you tithe. That means I'm going to do this for you. Oh, you didn't tithe. That means you're cursed now for the next month because until you get another chance. Like it doesn't work that way. And I do see things differently through the light of the old covenant and the new covenant, right? I'm not Jewish. The tithe was given to the Jewish people, and people argue Abraham gave a tithe and to Melchizedek. I understand like all that stuff, but the point is that I'm not under the law. I was never under the law, and the tithe was actually given to in the law. There's 3 instances where the tithe is mentioned, and 1 or 2 of them is where the actual person bringing the tithe consumes it themselves. So it's like, okay, we don't hear that one in church, right? It's always bring the tithe to the storehouse, give it to the church. Never you go partake and enjoy the 10% of the fruit of your labor. And yet that's exactly what was commanded at certain times and seasons for the Jewish people, for the Israelites. So it's kind of funny. But anyway, I see it under the new covenant where, hey, anybody, you give not reluctantly, not under compulsion, generously. God loves a cheerful giver. It's okay. Like our church talks about tithing. They don't preach it hardcore. Actually, I didn't even know until probably we went to like a membership class recently, and that's where they talked about it, but they never talked about it from the actual pulpit, that everybody should tithe or whatever. But they said, hey, this is a goal to get to. If you can't get there now, that's fine. No problem. And they don't there's like a hardcore stance on 10%, where some churches have that hardcore stance on 10%. I don't see it that way whatsoever. You give what you can, how you can. And if you have a percentage that you give, great. Like keep it there, move it up, get to 20%, whatever. I think I heard one famous minister talk about tithing, and he said, actually, if you add everything up that they were required to give in the Old Testament tithes and offerings, it equated to roughly like something in the 20% of their income altogether. That was actually required under the laws. So not just 10, it was more like 20. But we don't hear that. So it's fine. To be honest with your audience, I don't tithe. I haven't tithed in years. I haven't tithed since it's been probably 15 years. I don't give a tithe. We give, we donate, we help people. I love to do all that kind of stuff. Nothing wrong with that. Obviously, nothing wrong with that. But we don't tithe. And, it just is what it is. And I thank God that he's generous to us in that way. And it's helped us and grown and all that stuff. And, like where we're at in our business and everything, it's wonderful. We're able to give more and do more. And so that's always on our mind, right? Okay, how can we help? How can we do this? How can we do that? How can we help with the church? How can we help other people? We want to do those kinds of things. So I don't think that any sort of tithing, like if you think that tithing equates to God's blessing, then I am a testament that either God doesn't exist, or maybe that thinking is maybe off a little bit, and maybe go back and re-examine the scriptures and see, what it says, and then maybe examine like how you want to give and what you can do. So I have given, like you said, the 4 things where gave and tithe sacrificially, and when I didn't have it, I just gave it anyway and let God kind of take care of the rest, and see how that worked. I've done that, right? Been there, done that. And it's wonderful. It's fine. If that's where you're at in your season in your life, I'm not telling people to change their theology and that they're wrong. Like stick with it, go for it. But maybe if you're looking for a new perspective, then maybe think of it, think of some of the things I've mentioned here. So that's all.
Before I hit the stop button on the recording,
sure.
I guess the way I'll handle it is like, I'm ambivalent about whether you tithe or not. And
yeah,
there's a guy who messaged me recently after seeing that post, and he told me how he was like afraid of missing like a tithe. He was afraid of like what would happen if he didn't. And I said that there's something wrong with that.
That's not good. Yeah,
that's like that. That's the kind of thing I'll say, like there's something wrong there. So
yeah,
anyway, you can hear my kids are back home, and there's going to be no keeping them quiet anymore. So,
that's
but
great,
I know you've given me more time than I asked of you. So it might be a good, tithing would be a good conversation for like a whole other episode.
Someday.
Yes.
Yeah.
I don't know when.
Dive into.
But I appreciate your time, Kris. So
Absolutely.
You've got a podcast of your own for those interests, those that are
So I self-storage.
Plug whatever you want before we go.
Sure. I don't have anything to sell anybody. So just if you want to listen, if you want to learn more about real estate investing, specifically self-storage investing, that's what I've been doing for the last couple of years. You can look up the Storage Investor Show on YouTube and just wherever you listen to podcasts. I haven't published as of this recording today, October 13th, 2022. I have not uploaded a new episode in probably at least a year or so, a year and a half. But I'm actually going to start that back up here in the next, I'd say 6 weeks or something like that. So becoming more active again on socials. I took a break for a little while. So but yeah, we'll get back to it and, go from there.
And people can follow you. You're on social media.
Facebook and
LinkedIn for those.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to hit the stop button, but thanks again for your time, Kris. It was, I enjoyed it. We should have done this years ago, but it would have been a different conversation if we did. All right.
It definitely would have. Awesome. Thanks, Steve. Appreciate it.
Now, where's the stop button?